Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard. I would like to begin today with a simple question. How many decisions have shaped your life without you realizing it at the time? Think about it for a moment. The university you choose, the job you accepted, the city you moved to, the coach you decided to play for, the friend you decided to trust, the relationship you decided to pursue, or perhaps the opportunity you decided to walk away from. At the time, each decision probably felt ordinary, one choice among many. Yet, years later, when you look back, those ordinary moments suddenly appear extraordinary. Not because they felt significant when they happened, because you can finally see where they led. Perhaps that's one of the great mysteries of life. We only understand the importance of our decisions after they have already changed us. That creates an interesting problem. Every important decision in life asks us to choose before we possess the information we wish we had. If only we knew how the story ended. If only we knew which opportunity would open the right door. If only we knew which relationship would last. And if only we knew which risk would be worth taking. If only we knew, but we never know. We make decisions in the present. Understanding arises in the future. That's why making decisions is one of the greatest acts of uncertainty we experience as human beings. Yet, despite knowing this, we continue asking ourselves the same question. What if I make the wrong decision? I have asked myself that question many times. I am sure you have as well. Sometimes we ask it before accepting a new job, or changing schools, or ending relationship, or beginning a new one, or moving to another city, or sometimes before stepping into a leadership role we are not sure we are ready for. What fascinates me is that we often imagine there is one perfect decision waiting to be discovered, as though life were a multiple choice exam with only one correct answer. But I'm not convinced life works that way. Perhaps the better question is not what is the perfect decision? Perhaps it is what decision best reflects the person I am trying to become. Those are very different questions. One focuses entirely on outcomes, the other focuses on character. And character has a remarkable way of influencing outcomes over time. When I think back on my life, I realize that many of the decisions that changed me most didn't seem important at all. Some were conversations, some were opportunities or disappointments, some were moments when I almost chose differently. Had I made another choice, I would almost certainly have met different people, worked in different places, learned different lessons, and perhaps I would even be a different person. Then I thought it's both inspiring and humbling. It reminds us that our lives are not built only through dramatic moments. They are built through ordinary decisions repeated over months and years. Most of them feel completely unremarkable while we are making them. They are built through ordinary decisions repeated over months and years. A practice ended, a phone call returned, a book opened, a volunteer opportunity accepted, an invitation accepted or declined, a difficult conversation finally had instead of postponed. None of those moments usually feel life changing. Yet sometimes they quietly become turning points. Not because the decision itself was extraordinary, but because of the direction it began. Perhaps that's another misunderstanding we have about decisions. We tend to judge them by immediate results. We think a good decision should immediately produce a good outcome. But life is rarely that simple, too. Sometimes the right decision feels painful at first. Sometimes the wrong decision feels rewarding in the beginning. Time has a way of revealing what the moment cannot. A coach may decide to hold a talented player accountable. The player becomes frustrated. Parents question the decision. The season becomes more difficult. From the outside, it appears to have been the wrong decision. 5 years later, that same athlete says, that moment changed my life. The decision didn't become right because it felt good. It became right because of what it eventually produced. That's why wisdom requires patience. Not every decision should be judged immediately. Some decisions need years before their true value becomes invisible. Perhaps that's true of our own lives as well. Maybe we are too quick to label a season of life as success or failure. Maybe we try to evaluate a chapter before the story has been finished. And perhaps that's why uncertainty is not the enemy we often believe it to be. Uncertainty simply reminds us that life is still unfolding. The ending has not yet been written. The next chapter has not yet been lived, and maybe that's exactly where hope begins. The more I think about life, the less I believe that our biggest decisions change us overnight. Instead, I think they quietly introduce us to a different future. One decision leads to a different conversation. That conversation leads to a different opportunity. Then that opportunity introduces us to different people. Those people influence the way we think. The way we think changes the choices we make. And before we realize it, we are living a life that would never have existed had one ordinary decision been different. Life rarely changes in a straight line. It changes through a series of connections we could never have predicted. Looking back, those connections often seem obvious, but looking forward, they're almost impossible to see. That's why hindsight creates an illusion. Once we know how the story ends, we begin believing the ending was inevitable, but it never was. At every stage of life, dozens of possibilities quietly existed. One decision simply placed us on one path instead of another. Think about the people who have had the greatest influence on your life. Perhaps a coach, a teacher, a colleague, a mentor, a spouse, a close friend. Now ask yourself a simple question. What had to happen for you to meet that person? Well, perhaps you accepted a job you almost declined, or you attended an event you nearly skipped, or you moved to another city. You volunteered when you were tired. Perhaps someone invited you somewhere, and for some reasons you cannot even remember, you said yes. And at the time, the decision probably felt insignificant, yet without it, your life might have unfolded in an entirely different direction. Well, that fascinates me because we often imagine that life changes through dramatic moments, like winning championships, receiving awards, getting promoted, or achieving goals. But when people reflect on their lives many years later, they often remember something much quieter. Maybe a conversation, or maybe a recommendation, or maybe a chance meeting, a book someone suggested, or a coach who believed in them, maybe a teacher who challenged them, or a decision that seemed completely ordinary until time revealed its significance. Perhaps this is why wisdom requires humility. We simply do not know which moments are becoming the most important chapters of our lives. As coaches, we experience this all the time. A player joins a program, we naturally evaluate what they can contribute to the team. We think about their talent, their athletic ability, their potential, but years later, we often realize the greatest impact was never confined to basketball. Perhaps that athlete becomes a coach, maybe a teacher, a parent, a leader in the community, and some small conversation after practice, one that we barely remember having, remains with them for decades. That thought humbles me because it reminds us that leadership is rarely measured by what happens today. It is measured by what continues happening long after we are gone. Same is true in education. Teachers often wonder whether students are listening, whether lessons are making a difference, whether anyone will remember. Years later, former students return and say, I don't remember every lesson you taught, but I remember the way you treated me. I remember that you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I remember that you expected more from me than I expected from myself. Those moments become part of someone else's story, not because they were dramatic, because they were genuine. Relationships work the same way. Sometimes we spend years searching for the perfect person while overlooking something much more important. Every relationship begins with one ordinary decision. to say hello, to ask another question, to stay, to leave, to forgive, to trust, or perhaps to admit we were wrong. One conversation can restore a friendship. One conversation can end one. One apology can rebuild years of broken trust. One moment of pride can destroy it. The weight of a decision is rarely found in the decision itself. It is found in the future that decision quietly begins creating. Perhaps that's why regret can become such a heavy burden. When we regret a decision, we are rarely grieving only what happened. We are grieving the future we imagined, never experienced. The life we thought might have been. The opportunity we never pursued. The words we never spoke, the chances we allowed fear to take from us. But there is another side to that truth. If one decision can redirect a life in an unhealthy direction, then one courageous decision can begin leading it back. Maybe a difficult conversation, maybe a sincere apology, or maybe a commitment to change. The decision to ask for help, the decision to forgive, the decision to begin again. None of those erase the past, but each one quietly opens a future that did not exist the day before. Perhaps that's the greatest gift hidden inside every decision. Not certainty, possibility. Every decision closes one path, but it also opens another. And maybe wisdom is not found in wishing we could see every possible outcome. Maybe wisdom is learning to walk faithfully through the door we have chosen, trusting that today's ordinary decision may become tomorrow's extraordinary turning point. If there is one lesson life has taught me about decision, it is this. We spend far too much time trying to predict the future, perhaps because uncertainty makes us uncomfortable. We want guarantees, we want certainty. We want someone to assure us that if we choose this university, this career, this relationship, this opportunity, everything will work out exactly as we hope. But life has never offered those guarantees. Never has. And perhaps it never should. And certainty requires no courage. But if we already knew every outcome, there would be nothing to trust, nothing to risk, nothing to believe. Courage exists because certainty does not. That realization changed the way I think about leadership. When people look at leaders, they often imagine they possess confidence that everyone else lacks. I'm not convinced that it is true. I think great leaders wrestle with uncertainty just as much as everyone else. The difference is not that they know more, the difference is that they eventually decide. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but responsibly. They understand that waiting forever is also a decision. Choosing not to act is still choosing. Avoiding responsibility is still a direction. And life continues moving, whether we move it or not. And perhaps that's why indecision can quietly become one of the most expensive decisions we ever make. Not because every opportunity disappears, but because time does. While we are waiting for perfect clarity, life keeps unfolding. The seasons continue changing, people continue growing, and opportunities continue passing. And one day we look back and realize we were not protecting ourselves from failure. We were protecting ourselves from living. And that's a difficult truth because many of us believe fear keeps us safe. Well, sometimes it does, but fear can also quietly keep us small. It convinces us that certainty is a requirement before commitment. Yet, almost everything meaningful in life begins long before certainty arrives. No coach begins a season knowing exactly how it will end, or no teacher begins a school year knowing every student they will influence. Or no parent receives a roadmap explaining every challenge they had. No one entering a marriage has every answer, and no one stepping into leadership has complete confidence. They simply begin, and somewhere along the journey, experience slowly replaces uncertainty. Perhaps wisdom has never been about predicting the future. Perhaps wisdom is learning to make today's decision with honesty, integrity, humility, and courage, then accepting responsibility for wherever that decision leads. That perspective changes everything. Instead of asking, what if I make the wrong decision? Perhaps we should start asking, will I become the kind of person who can respond well, whatever the outcome? That's a question within our control. Those outcomes are never fully ours to determine. Character is. Maybe that's what life has been teaching us all along. Our greatest security has never been in making perfect decisions, it has been in becoming the kind of people who continue growing through imperfect ones. But looking back, I can honestly say that some of the decisions I once regretted became the very experience that prepared me for opportunities I never could have imagined. And at the time, they felt like setbacks, and years later, they look like preparation. Not because the pain disappeared, because the meaning changed. That has made me much slower to judge a season of life while I'm still living it. A closed door may be protecting us from the wrong path. A delay may be preparing us for a greater responsibility. A disappointment may quietly become the foundation for future wisdom. But we rarely know while we are standing in the moment. Only time reveals the purpose of many of our decisions. Perhaps that's why faith and leadership have always shared something in common. Neither asks us to wait until every answer is visible, but both ask us to move forward with conviction despite incomplete information. That's not weakness, that's courage. And perhaps courage is not the absence of uncertainty. Perhaps courage is choosing to move forward while uncertainty is still sitting beside us. As we close today's episode, I want to leave you with one final thought. Imagine looking back on your life 20 years from now. I don't think you will remember every decision you made, but I think you will remember the kind of person those decisions slowly help you become. More patient, more resilient, more compassionate, more faithful, more courageous, or perhaps more fearful, more hesitant, more comfortable. Every decision is quietly shaping someone, and that someone is you. So the next time you find yourself standing at crossroad, don't ask only what decision guarantees the best outcome. Instead, I want you to ask this question: what decision reflects the person I hope to become? Because in the end, our lives are not built one extraordinary moment at a time. They are built on one ordinary decision at a time. And over the years, those ordinary decisions become a direction. And that direction becomes a life. And that life becomes your legacy. Thank you for joining for another episode of Beyond the Scoreboard. Until next time, remember this. You will never know the future before you make a decision, but you can always choose the kind of person you want to be while making it. And perhaps that has been the most important decision all along.